Hello techies, I'm Divya here. On behalf of CyberBrainer, don't you think the world of tech is evolving faster than ever? Now is the perfect time to dive in and build the skills that will take you places. With CyberBrainer, we are putting you in the driver's seat of your own future. We at CyberBrainer don't just teach your interest. We believe that knowledge is power, but it's applied knowledge that truly sets you apart. Whether you're diving into data science, mastering artificial intelligence, or exploring the world of cybersecurity, our courses are designed to give you the skills that matter. So let's jump into the session and make the future yours today. Thank you.
Subflows and variables. This is very important concept. The second concept I'd like to cover about the restituted twist component. Once you finish this one, I will go to the API area. Excellent. That is the second one. Let me briefly, in 5 minutes, let me recap what we discussed far in the last session. See, we start our journey with understanding the message processing. Message processing is very important. Why we start the message processing? The reason is Mule need to process different kinds of messages, not only a single kind of message. We need to understand different kinds of messages. What we discussed is there is a flow component. Is there? Flow is a very basic component of the Mule. It will receive and process the message from which to number. The flow component contains primarily 3 sections. The first section is the source section. And second section is the process section, processor. And third section is the F. The source section depends upon the source from where we are receiving the message. Based on the source where we are getting message. If the message is coming from HTTP, we place the candidate that is able to understand HTTP message. That is HTTP listener. That is right. Based on the source, we configure this source component. What the source component will do? If you receive the HTTP message right, but this HTTP message is not understandable by the process components. Process components understand only Mule message. Mule event message. That is right. The source component will transform the incoming message to the Mule event message or Mule message and hand over to the process components. Process components you will contact. This is one of the basic components, right? That is right. That is right. The source point will be covered. And the second point is how the event components look like. It contains 3 sections. See, once the source creates the event component, the Mule event component contains 3 sections. It is very important. Attribute section, attribute. And the payload section. The area section. To access the specific section, we need to use using expression language, right? That is, add and square bracket, put the payload here that we can able to retrieve the content of the payload. This is Mule event is very important. This will travel across your flow from starting to ending. Everything happens on the Mule event object. And at the end, the process completes. What happened? The last component gives a Mule event back to you, your listener, source component. Source component again transforms that to the HTTP message and send back to layer response. HTTP response back to the client. Last, we're saying that after it get processed, right? It sends back to the requester. It sends back to the requester. Exactly. or the connector. Exactly. This requester. The client doesn't understand the mule event right. What is this going to do? Once again, transforms the way the client understands. That again it has HTTP request, HTTP response. And then sends back his response to the postman or whatever comes from the client. Alright? When it sends back to the HTTP or to the listener or whatever, or the source. When it sends back to the source, then is that format, is the mule formatted message, or is it going to be like it's going to be transferred to another format, or is it going to be a mule event? The mule event is not understandable by your source component, right? If you use the mule event component to source, is this source to understand the mule event? What this guy do again? It transforms the mule event to back to HTTP message. When you send it back, it will be HTTP message. Correct. The listener understand that HTTP. Correct. Because that's what the original source was. Basically, this is the concept we discussed in the last session. Now let me extend the session and today discuss about the first component is the subflows and variables. First, the topic is subflows and variables. Let me open my slide on subflows and variables. We will talk about what is subflow and next is how to call a subflow and the what are variables and the link between subflows and variables. This is the agenda of the optimization. Now we discuss about what is subflow. As your developer write in your program, maybe Java or any Java or Python or whatever programming language, you have a requirement like a piece of code that used multiple places in your application. In the same piece of code, you use multiple places in your application. Do you write that piece of code everywhere it requires, or do you write in one place and you call that the request? How we? Usually we write something like methods or functions, right? Methods or functions in programming languages. Why we do the method and functions? With the same piece of logic. Same logic is using multiple places in your application. We won't write the duplicate logic everywhere. What we'll do? We write that logic in one piece. One place that we call as a method, and this method is called wherever it is required. This uses a reusability of your code. What is the advantage of reusability is? It gives your application more consistency. For example, this is the code relatively connected to some database. Just using this code, you are connected to database. Right? You need to change something in the database configuration, like password or in database whatever. What happens is, if you write the same code in multiple places, you want to do some change. You need to go and change everywhere, in every place. Sometimes developers do change here and here, then they forget to do here, that the code is not consistent. What the fundamental is, we need to wrap that common piece of code in one place, and we need to use that from that place. Similarly, in the Mule, to make a reusable component, that reusable component is subflow. Subflow is simply nothing but a block of reusable logic. That's right. Ideally, we discuss about flow. Flow contains 3 sections. Flow contains sections like a event source, because it has to receive message from external world. And in case of subflow, do you think subflow also requires event source? No, yes, it has to be the main source, right? Subflow is simply a reusable logic that it doesn't need an event source, only a set of event processors only. That's right. There is a main flow that can call the subflow. Excellent. Fantastic. Fantastic. You catch it. Main flow uses a subflow. Therefore, subflow doesn't require the EO. It won't get message from external world. Only the main flow is a candidate would get the message from external world. It will use as the subflow. I have one more flow, one more main flow. This main flow also may call subflow. Same jig. This is flow A and the flow B. Flow A is using this logic and flow B is also this logic. I can call this subflow in multiple flows wherever this logic is required. Now one more very important point in subflows. Most of people confuse and they misunderstand this. This point is very key to understand. This reason carefully. Usually if you are from Java background or Python background, what is the background? What is the method? What is the method? We write some methods like this. Suppose there is some method. Some method takes integer A and integer B. What is the method? It returns. It returns A something like this logic in there. Here I call the sum. Passing 3 and 4. What it is, something like 7. Right. Here, if you are from programming language background, it's nothing, but we are calling this functionality, passing this as inputs to this method. And whatever execution happens here, and the execution result will back to the main, where we call it. If something I am collecting over here, index is equal to sum. Now x is equal to 7 over here. It's like this usually programming language. That's right. But there is some difference in the Mule. Mule works in different way. It is like this. For example, I have a sum main form. Main form is to be using a message from external world. From some postman, I send some message. What happens is I write a subflow. I have some components on here. I have some components if I have a subflow. I will tell you what is the component, what different kinds of components are available. What happens is I have a component called the flow reference. Using the flow ref component, I can invoke or I can refer the subflow. use this flow ref component. If you want to come back, we will ask which flow you want to refer. Here I can tell. Guys, please refer this flow subflow and name. This flow has name. Subflow is the name of this flow, and I use the reference as subflow. If you configure to call this subflow, what happens is here. What are the components inside the subflow? There are 4 components here, right? These 4 components will come and replace this component. Now the flow is like this. Wherever you. What? If you refer a subflow, all the subflow components will become a part of the main flow. The main flow. Now the Mule level comes to travel slides from this, and this slides. These 4 components are from subflow, right? But if you refer a subflow, all the subflow components become part of the main flow. The main flow. We need to understand. But I have a question. I understand exactly what the flow reference means here. But even though it's going to function like the subflow, with ref, with a flow reference. Like you said, when you have a flow reference, whatever that it's referenced to, it will look like it's in part of the main flow, right? But that's maybe logical way. But when you're designing, you have to have a subflow, right? Correct. And like, for example, when you create a main flow like this and say that, for example, and you have a second component, for example, you put the flow reference, and for reference, you will talk to the subflow and do what you're supposed to do and then return the information to the main flow. It's like it's not going there and coming back. Information to main flow. It's not like that. When you refer a subflow, all the subflow components will come and sit over here in the main flow, the flow difference place. It replaces the flow reference. What, I'm with you? But I'm with you, but somehow, because the other example you gave, which like most the sub functions or subflows or subroutine is all that stuff exactly for other program. You know the subprogram. Subroutine is usually it's outside the main, exactly the main program, correct? It does the calculation and you get the return or the answer to back the main, correct? Here you're saying that you might design it as a subflow. But when you have a flow reference, everything that's inside that flow reference configuration, within the subflow, all that component will. They will be like logically in the main flow, or they will be like all that information will be like, programmatically, or I don't know. System-wise, they will be part of the main flow. Once you configure a flow reference, what happens is logically, all the flow reference components will become part of the main flow. Subflow components will become part of the main flow. Sometimes, then, if that's the case, sometimes you don't have to use the flow reference. But we need to use the flow reference to refer the subflow. Without using flow reference, you can't refer subflow. Alright, I'm with you. I'm just challenging. No problem, let's discuss. I think I now understand. Anyway, the point here is that if there's a subflow, is there a flow reference in the main flow? Anything that refers to them and flow reference. I need to think like it's in the main flow, within the main flow. Got it? Let me go back to the slides. Subflow is used to compress usable logic in application. When subflow is invoked from other flow, the subflow components become part of the calling. Calling flow is a main flow. Main flow subflow doesn't have source and error head exceptions because subflow is not an independent component. That's right. Somebody should, give input to subflow means, somebody need to call the subflow. And subflows are invoked using the coreference common completion logic inside the flow. It would be invoked by many flows, wherever it needs that logic. Subflow is simple to simple component. Let me show the subflow component over here. Simple subflow, component subflow. It's simple box. Nothing is there, right? I have one quick question, sure. And is there like a subflow? Wonderful question. I'm coming to that point only. All right. Very passionately listening. That's true. That's nice. See here. What happens is if you use the flow reference referring to subflow and whatever component inside the subflow. Now, in this scenario, there is only one component, the set period component. But probably it may have multiple components also. All these components will come and replaces the flow reference right after the flow reference. How this flow looks like is listener, set, payload and logger. It become like that. Visualize, you can realize the flow, right? Listener and the set period replaces the flow reference and logger with the flow. Become like that of the flow reference. Yes? Now the question. I come to you. I want to answer a question. It's like usually, we thought that the flow will refer to subflow, flow reference, and subflow can refer another subflow. Or even a subflow can refer a flow, but there will. Then, if that's the case, say that you have a main flow and you have a flow reference to subflow, then gonna create another flow reference inside the subflow, correct. And then remember the logic that the subflow references will be part of the main flow. The second subflow within the subflow. No, I'm sorry. If you have a flow reference in the subflow, right? Does that mean then whatever in the flow reference, that subflow information, it will be part of the main or it will be? You see, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I explained well, but are you following me? I'm following you. The point you taught me now was that every time you have a flow reference and there's a subflow there, any component in the subflow, they will be part of the main flow. Right now, let's say we introduce subflow, right? The first subflow, we have a flow reference and that flow reference is pointed to a, second subflow, right? Correct. The component of the second subflow, is it going to be part of the first subflow or is it going to be part of the main flow? Component of the second subflow, it might be. See, I will have a still first. Using the flow reference, right, you can refer a flow can refer a subflow, or a flow can refer another main flow. It's not like that. Using flow reference, flow only refer to subflow. Flow can refer another main flow. That's first point. And second point is the flow can refer a subflow in subflow. We will put some other flow reference component. Using that, you can refer one more subflow. That's right. Or using this flow reference component, you can refer a flow also either whatever. If you have a flow, you may have one flow reference that is calling one flow or one subflow, and you can put one more flow reference to call another subflow. And this subflow has one more flow reference that is calling another subflow, and this flow reference has one more calling one more subflow. It's like this. But the point I want to understand is that on these subflows, about this one, if you have a flow reference, is the logic that wherever you assign or create a flow reference, the flow reference will look like the component of the cephalo, will be part of the whatever you define the flow reference, right? For example, if you could make the set in this diagram here, if you can make the say that, for example, like if you put this, the main one in one down, maybe call it a here, what happens is, see, assume this final supply has three components. Whatever, these components will come and occupy over here in this space. Right? That's right. That's my question. That's good. Wherever you configure the flow reference right, all the components will move to the subflow that you configure the flow reference correct. Got it? Now, all this will move over here, and all this will move over here. They move over this vector like this way through. It can go to any level, which is not like, you are supposed to stop at one point. No, it will go to any level. But what happens is, whenever the flow references, they are all replaced by all the sub-flow component replaced by the flow reference. Let's go like this, right? When, for example, when flow is referring other flow, not subflow is in, the flow is referring other main flow, what happens is, in that case, only the process components take into consideration the source, ignore only the process. Whatever the process section, this will become part of over here. They will come over sick over here. It's good also, but my little question also is that, yes, there should be only one main flow, right, in the flow in your application. In the application, it's not. The rule is not there. You could have multiple main flows in your application, multiple levels, but ideally, when you develop an API, it will create only one main flow for application, and all the requests you will go with the router. The router routes on the request different subflows. Here, let me show you. Here, let me show you another project. Here, see, this is only main flow. It is only flow that will take request from the external world, and it routes the request to different other flows. See, this is also main flow, but the source is not defined over here. If there is no source, means it can't receive message from external world. If the main flow is defined, but there is no source, means it won't get the message from external world. But in the internally one flow can refer other flow. This kind of flows we call a private flow. This only called inside your application. Only that's right is, This is not, and also, so it's not a subflow. It's not a subflow. What is that? Is a private. It's a private flow. What is it? It's also main flow. It's only, if you want, you can put some configuration, some source here, that option is there over here, but subflow. There is no such option. If you can't be subflow, there is no source component itself. You can't put a source to this company. But the main flow, your wish, you want to configure source. If you want to receive message from a specific source system, you'll configure a source. If you don't want to get this one. This one, like the Robin Me queue, this one, that the post message application. What is it? What is it? Getting the input from the other flow. Can call this flow. Here, your router is calling this flows. But you may have the main flow, and if, for example, this is one flow, this is one for write, I can call this flow from here. Using flow reference, I put a flow reference for reference. Then you say, and I can call in the flow reference. I can configure that on the post messages. What happens is this will call this will call this flow. I mean, we will talk about that one. Don't worry. All right, excellent, thank you. Now, is that very fascinating? A lot of options, but you got to know how they communicate, how the route works. Correct. If you practice all these basic things, and that was right, you will know, you will use also. Wow, I cannot wait to master and hope you got the concept of subflow right. Yep, I do just blindly remember one thing, the subflow. Subflow can be called using flow reference component. Right, when you use the flow reference component, if you refer any subflow flow, all the components of subflow will come and replace the flow reference component. Got it? That's all right. Let me show this single full application demo here. Develop the demo application. What I will do is, I will configure one flow reference. Let me show the flow reference component. See here, just focus on these two flows. This flow name is demo project flow 2. Just I'm changing some flow yet for a readable device. Right? What happening is, I'm configured one flow reference component. If we click on the flow reference component, it will show you the properties to the configure. It is asking, the flow name means which flow you want to refer here in the flow reference component. I need to configure the flow name write flow or subflow. Here I have subflow. This subflow name is subflow. I'm configuring. I want to refer that one, I can call like sub write. What happens? This will call this. Only one thing we need to tell is, you need to tell what is the flow name we want to refer in the flow reference component. Write that where the target value. That I will tell. After variables, we have the variables topic. After variable, I come back to that one. Now coming to the variables. What is your idea of variables in any programming language? To store information. Right? Excellent to fantastic. To store the information that is required in your application. After some time, or whenever we want to retrieve that information, that kind of information we store inside variables. Right? Similar thing applies in the Mule also. In Mule also if you want to store something new, please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.